So please welcome Mike and Deborah as they come to share.
So while Deborah's getting her mic, I'm Mike Bailey. Deborah usually just refers to me as her trophy husband. So here y'all need an autograph, let me know. I told her she needed to embrace some of her mistakes, and she keeps giving me a hug every time I say that for some reason. I hadn't figured it out yet. So, no, we're glad to be here. I know surprisingly, several of y'all. So I went to high school with a bunch of guys and church and different things. So pretty neat to see some guys that I know. But we're glad that we got invited to be here, and we want to tell a little bit of our story and just some thoughts that we have. So I'm about as redneck as red gets. So don't expect a lot of wow and special things, and you'll hear a lot of uhs in this conversation. But just get comfortable and we'll just kind of tell what we have to tell, okay?
Yeah, and we represent War Eagle, Roll Tide. So. But we're honored to be here. The room is absolutely beautiful, and the food looks amazing. And the picture here is a little dated, obviously. Mike and I have been married, it'll be 30 years this July. We have 2 children. We have a son named Ty. He is 20 now and goes to Highlands College. He has a calling right now for student ministry, but one day wants to be a pastor and have his own church. We have a daughter named Ashlyn, and she's 25, and she lives in heaven right now with Jesus. Both our children were saved at a really young age. In fact, I attended community Bible study here at this church, and he went through the preschool program with community Bible study here. So for any of y'all that are here that do that, thank you, because he learned so much while he was here. Ashlyn started taking drugs her 9th grade year. She was a cheerleader at a local high school. It started out with marijuana. She struggled for 5 years. At the end, she used about any type of drug that there was, but her drug of choice was heroin, and on January 30th of 2016, she died of an overdose of heroin that was laced with fentanyl. You know, and all of it has been really, really tough. The addiction and her death has been hard, but we both can stand here and say that God has been our powerhouse, our source of strength, and he has been making beauty out of the ashes of her addiction and her death ever since, and he's just still unraveling the story. And we just can't wait to see how it unfolds.
So after Ashlyn died, we felt led to start the Ashlyn Bailey Foundation in her memory, and felt like God kind of gave us 3, I guess you call it pillars, to kind of follow through with that. So one of them, her drug dealer ended up getting convicted of a charge. It's called distribution leading to death. So it's basically a federal murder conviction, and her case set a new standard for Alabama. They had tried people and convicted them before Ashlyn's death, but in every case, the victim had one drug in their system. With Ashlyn, she had like a antidepressant type medicine. She had weed, marijuana, and then she had the fentanyl, heroin. And she was the first conviction in Alabama that they actually got the conviction on that. So it sets up the possibility for some higher standards in Alabama, and we're hoping in time that, you know, the legal side starts enforcing a little bit stricter penalties for that. I think that couldn't hurt, whatever. You know, I don't know how much it'll stop when money's involved that it is with drugs, but that's our hope with that. The second thing is, you know, both of us feel led to be able to tell our story and what we went through as parents. So settings like this in groups, or whether it be just like one-on-one, those type things, we feel like, that's the story that we went through, and we feel like God's going to, use it to help other people. So, we feel like, that's our charge that we're supposed to do. And then also Deborah's book kind of plays into that. Her book is a devotional that she wrote going through the whole process with Ashlyn. And, she would write on it for a day or two. She might put it down for a month, might write on it for another week or something. It's just when God kind of gave her different thoughts. And what it does is it helps if you're a parent that has a child that's or just anybody that has a friend that's going through addiction, it kind of helps you anchor in your beliefs what God tells you and what the Word says. And it's very, very good. I'm proud of her for that. It is, like they said, it's $10. If you ain't got $10, get a book. I don't care. It's fine. If you got $100, put it in there. When you read it, you get a lot more out of it that way. So put 100 in there and see how much better it is. So, but it's just, if you don't have $10, don't worry about it. Just get a book. We're fine with it.
Yeah.
We only have about 20 out there. So, but if you are a parent that is dealing with it, or a loved one in your family, that it really is directed toward that. And I think it does very good. So, and then the third thing that we felt led to do was we would see a lot of people that were in addiction, had gotten past it, but they felt like my life's ruined forever, and I'll never get, out of this, and I'll never be anything, and that type thing. But every once in a while, we would meet, at different places that Ashlyn rehabs and things that she was at. We'd meet somebody that knows that they got freed from it, knows that God has led them to tell their story and be something. So we scholarship those students through Highlands College, and some of them through, there's another church that has a ministry, Kingsway College, and we scholarship that, and what we're trying to do is give them a little backbone for it, give them a little education with it, but help them just get that jump start. So, for us, Ashlyn was in 9 different rehabs for over 5 years. I can't tell you how many people I met in that were going through addiction. I have never met a single person that had an addiction problem with drugs or alcohol that I didn't like. Every one of them are the nicest people. They're the most fun to be around. They're high energy. Everybody. I know in this room, y'all have people that y'all know that are having struggles with addiction, and every one of them would. I'm telling you, if I told you Ashlyn and her personality and characteristics, it would be just like everyone else. They're fun to be around. So, and we just felt like that's our thing, that we're supposed to be helping get in the middle of that. And I know just y'all being here is the same thing. So, my side of it is for years, I would, say we need to break addiction. We need to pray addiction off of somebody. They don't need to be addicted. Well, the truth of the matter is we're all addicts. We're supposed to be addicted to God, okay? The enemy's come in and he's perverted it and got us addicted to, in a lot of cases like what he's dealing with drugs and alcohol. There's sex, pornography, money, greed, pride. I can go on and on and on. But the truth of the matter is that is all just a perversion of the enemy, okay? And we need to be addicted. We just need to direct that addiction toward God. And that's just our feelings on it. But anyway, okay.
I just love that John has named his ministry Unbound Grace. I sat there and thought about all of it over the last few months when he first approached us for coming to speak tonight. Unbound, you think of not being tethered, not being fastened down. And then you have grace, and that is, undeserved favor, having God's love no matter what. And so with Unbound Grace, you are not held to the world and it's, what it says about addiction or anything, but instead you're connected with God. And Unbound Grace is just freedom in Christ. And so not only for the person that is struggling with addiction, but for all of us in here that are loved ones, of those people that are having difficulty with, getting over the addiction or in recovery. When we're addicted to God, we can live in that freedom no matter what the circumstance no matter what the circumstance or storm is. But when we're addicted to things of this world, then we're going to become prisoners and bound to that person, that substance, or that thing. And I'll go out on a limb to say, if anyone here, has a loved one that has addiction, you in some way, you may not be now, but at some time when the addiction first started, because of all the fear and anxiety that goes with that, you actually become addicted to that person. You may call it codependency or enabling. They're the first thing you think about in the morning when you wake up. They're the last thing you think about when you go to bed. It's a conversation you have with all of your friends, and they get tired of hearing about it. You talk to your families telling you what to do. You have everyone in the whole world telling you what to do, and you're constantly talking about it. And really what's happening is your loved one is taking the place of God. You are thinking more about that addiction problem, and that addiction is becoming bigger than God. And that's where, we need to stop that. So, but God gives us hope, and there's a way that we can have freedom when we're struggling with addiction, or if we're struggling loving someone through an addiction.
So, all that said, we feel like every time we kind of look back on what we went through as a family, and when we're talking with other people, seems to be the same kind of things keep coming up in our mind, okay? And I think this is kind of, I'm sure there's a 50 different things we could sit up here and talk about, but these are just the things that we see over and over and over again. And I think, just like Deborah's book is called God Our Anchor, we want to be anchored in God, okay? So for us, one of the first main things is I don't know how to say this friendly or not, but I think we have to either believe what God says, or we're going to believe what the enemy says, okay? Deuteronomy has a verse that talks about, whether are you putting a false god before him, and if you if you put a false god before him, none of us intentionally are going to say, well, I'm choosing this over God. But we get so, just like Deborah's saying, we get so involved in it that before we know it, it becomes our God. It becomes something that we worship. We even say, in a way, we actually worship or put our daughter on a pedestal and worshiped her even more than God. And I mean, yes, we love her to death. I would give anything and everything to have her healed and whole here with us. But we also, you can replace God with that as a God. And I think, for us, it's kind of, well, I don't really do that. Well, an example for me is especially when we first started into it, we were like, man, I hope nobody ever finds out we're dealing with this as a family. Man, if they knew what we're going through, man, I'd be embarrassed, or what would they think about me, or that type thing. And I mean, so instead of putting it in front of God and giving it to him, we let it become our little God, okay? And I just, so kind of think through that if you are dealing with it, and just make sure that you are staying centered in God and giving him, full control over it. The second thing is as you kind of go through the process, there's a lot of anger and resentment that gets brought up. There's a lot of things that happen that hurt. It's not intentional. It's not that they're, aiming at you, but it's just you can't avoid it when you're dealing with somebody in addiction. There's going to be a lot of hurt. Well, so to walk past that, you have to walk through forgiveness. Now, I'm not saying that you got to agree that what they did was right. You can't say that. You can't say that you're agreeing with it or anything like that. But you've got to release that bondage that it has on you, okay? And if you can't, then you can't speak truth over the situation. You can't, there's a verse that talks about Jesus came as truth and grace, okay? So he said, like the woman at the well, you're doing the wrong thing, but I'm going to walk this out with you, and we're going to leave sin behind. Well, it's kind of the same thing with this. We have to be able to walk in that truth and grace. And the problem is if you have not forgiven, then I don't think you fully can. Give an example. Look at somebody at your table, tell them how nice their shirt is, and at the same time count from 10 back to 1. You cannot do it. I've tried it over and over. My brain is so good I can beat this, and I've tried and you can't. You can't, you can think of one thing and then you drop back to the other one and back and forth, but you cannot stay focused on one thing. And it's kind of the same thing. If you haven't walked out forgiveness and gotten past that, I don't think you can walk and speak in true life over the situation. So think through what you're dealing with. Be sure that there's not any unforgiveness that you need to deal with, because I think that is one of the number one strongholds that the enemy is going to put in our face, okay? We got a true enemy. We need to fight him and not the person standing in front of us. So
with the forgiveness and speaking life, that's all a part of God's unconditional love for us. He gives us forgiveness, and he speaks and calls us not what we do, but who we are, a child of God. You need to have that unconditional love for your loved one that is struggling with addiction. That's a choice. That's loving them no matter what they're doing or how they're acting. And that's really, really, really hard when you are facing a manifestation because the person is either high or they may be going through a withdrawal and they're wanting their next fix. That's really hard. So you want to tether that with healthy boundaries. Those boundaries need to be set in place before the heat of an argument. You don't throw up a boundary without thought. It takes, if you're a couple, if it's a child, or if it's a spouse, it's something you need to sit down together as a couple or with a mentor that has been through it, so you kind of understand kind of what kind of boundaries, because these boundaries need to be things that you can actually do, not just because a person in addiction is going to call you on it. They are just going to flat out call you on it, and you need to be able to follow through with a consequence for the boundary. So it's not something you just do on the spur of the moment. It's something you need to give some thought and pray about. It needs to be something that you can follow through on, and then you need to stand up behind it. And a boundary is not, I get a lot of flack sometimes from people. They don't like boundaries, or they'll say that I can't do that to my child or my spouse. But a boundary is not to control the person that is using the drug or the alcohol. The boundary is for you. It is for you so that you stay in control and you're not yelling and screaming and sinning in your anger and everything else that's going on. It's to protect your relationship that you have with your child or your spouse or your friend or your family member. It also defers or deters any enabling or codependency on your part too, if you have those healthy boundaries in place. And it's biblical. Boundaries are biblical. If you look in Genesis 2, God told man, he said, you can eat of any tree in the garden, but do not eat of the tree in the center of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And you can almost say that could be a drug. The drug, drugs can be used as a good thing, but the world and Satan has perverted it into evil. So when Adam and Eve, they took the fruit and they ate of it, they sinned, and so God's boundary was you have to leave the garden. He didn't kick them out of the house, and he didn't disown them. No, he came looking for them in the garden. He made a way. That was where the first sacrifice of forgiveness of sin was given, when he made their clothes to help cover up their shame that they were having. He chased after them, pursued them, and called them by name. Yes, they had to leave the garden, and they had consequences that they had to follow through with because they disobeyed that boundary. But God kept loving them and pursuing them the entire time. And that's what you do as a loved one for an addict. You do not back away from your boundary. You stick with it. And Satan's going to tell you and whisper in your ear, you don't really love that person. And I won't be surprised if your loved one that's suffering from addiction will throw that back in your face, but you're not. God loved Adam and Eve, and the reason why he put them out of the garden was not to be mean to them. That was so that they did not die in their sin. Same thing, you're trying to prevent your loved one from dying from the addiction. And, that didn't always happen. It didn't happen in our case, but we know that she's healed and whole. It wasn't the prayer that we were praying that she would recover here on earth, and Ashlyn's prayer was she wanted to be instantly healed. Well, God answered that prayer for her, and she's healed and whole in heaven now. And, we just praise God for that.
So, kind of going back to it, we're going to focus on God, put him in charge of what's going through, okay? Get rid of any unforgiveness so that we can be the best that we can for them. Show them unconditional love. There's going to be times where it's going to be hard, but we are basically the only thing they have. They will. An addict will tell you how many friends they have, but when it all gets to the end, they really have their family and their very, very closest friends. So we have to be ready for that. And then the last thing for us that was a big problem is you isolate. Okay, you're going to get by yourself. You're going to, whether it be through guilt and shame type deal, or whether it be, for us or for me, anyway, maybe not so much Deborah, but for me, I have a little bit of a pride issue. Some of the people in here that know me would back this up. But my pride, I just couldn't believe I'm dealing with it, or I'm in the middle of this, that type thing, so I'd isolate. And that's the enemy's favorite place to get you. And when you do, he's going to win every time. So you need a support system, whether it be unbound grace. This type issue needs to be talked about, okay? Now, I am one of those that I don't want to stand in front of a group and everybody just tell their story, and at the end of the day, all it is just everybody's sad story. I want to, in the end, I want to walk into something better, okay? But you do need to be able to talk to people that understand it, that are in the middle of it with you, that have been there, maybe walked past it and that type of thing. Because so that God, when he went through creation, he made the earth, it's good. He made this, it's good. He made this, it's good. He made man, and he said it's not good. He needs a helper, right? I think the enemy, the devil, and y'all got to hear me to the end of this, so don't say I'm misquoting this, but I think the enemy could care less if we do drugs. I think he could care less if we drink. He could care less if you're cheating on your wife. He could care less if you're, whatever you fill in the blank. His whole thing is he heard God say it's not good for him to be alone, okay? And he said, the devil is a created being. He doesn't have an original thought to save his life. All he does is wait till he hears something that he can work on. And he heard he needs a partner. Well, if he needs a partner, well, I need to break that up, okay? And I think that is his entire goal with this, is to break up families in this nation, in this world, through whatever means he can. And right now, he is wreaking havoc on us through addiction. And I think that's the whole goal with it. Everybody that's in here that's dealing with it will tell you the same thing. How hard is it on your family? How hard is it being around it? And I think that's it. So you get isolated, get by yourself, and he's going to eat your lunch every single time. So don't let it happen. If you need a support, a lot of this, I know a lot of y'all are friends from church. There's certain places and times for everything. But your church, Unbound Grace, your family, different things like that, you need that support. So don't isolate, please, because that's where he wants you.
So staying in community is important. And another step that you want to do is we all heal when we help and serve each other. Psychologists will tell you that is like your top need is being able to give back to society, to be able to serve. There's so much healing when you help others. So whatever you're going through, whether you're someone in here that's going through an addiction or you're a loved one that loves someone struggling with addiction, God's going to use it. And just open up your heart to the Holy Spirit and ask him, why am I going through this? What do you want me to learn? What do I need to do? How do I need to improve myself? And then how can I use this to help others? Because God, that's what he wants us to do. We're the hands and feet of Jesus. The disciples were arguing one time with what's the greatest commandment. And Jesus said to love your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength. So that means staying addicted to God. Don't have anything else. You shouldn't half-heartedly love God. You love him with your whole being. And then he said to love your neighbor. Your neighbor is your child, your spouse, your family member, or your friend that's struggling with addiction. That's an unconditional love. It is not a love that gives in or, acts like nothing's wrong. It's definitely a love that has boundaries and discipline. God disciplines his children because he loves us. And then it also says, love your neighbor as yourself. So you need to love yourself. Give yourself some unbound grace and some freedom to heal and be the person God has called you to be. No matter what storm you're going through with the addiction, you still have beautiful things to look forward to and be a part of something great in the midst of the storm that you're going through.
So that's, I guess, the points we wanted to make is just focus on God, be healed and whole, forgiveness for whatever you need, be able to show that love to the loved one, and then have a community. And I think that is, if you read his mission statement, is exactly what we're saying. So it's amazing how it kind of, like it almost is true. So, would love to meet all y'all, to talk to y'all. Has anybody got any questions that y'all would like to ask or anything? I'm an open book. You probably hadn't been through anything that I hadn't been through, number one. I can stand up here and tell you some stories of what all we went through, and we can really compare some notes, but we're an open book. If anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask, we're ready, willing, and able.